Coming up on today's show, we break down the very much anticipated Longlegs.
Is it scary being a lady FBI agent? Yeah.
Take a nice long look.
Stay tuned. Welcome to Scary World, where we walk you through the latest and greatest in the world of horror. I am your host, Arturo Padilla.
Hi.
For those of you just joining us, don't forget to subscribe up above and say what's up down below. We have one major rule around here: no spoilers. Now that we got that out of the way, there are 5 categories: production, story, ensemble, horror, and legacy. Each category can score the maximum of 2 points.
Showtime.
Per IMDb, the synopsis goes: in pursuit of a serial killer, an FBI agent uncovers a series of occult clues that she must solve to end his terrifying killing spree. Longlegs was directed by Osgood Perkins, who had previously directed the very aesthetic Gretel and Hansel and 2015's The Blackcoat's Daughter. With Longlegs, Perkins showcases a very artistic eye behind the camera.
I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, with 7 heads and 10 horns.
This is both a positive and a negative. There is good shot composition throughout, but there are also odd visual decisions made that are just as confusing as the story itself. Perkins and his crew play around with the aspect ratio of the film.
Do you still say your prayers?
But there is no payoff to any of these artistic decisions. Usually in movies where you see the aspect ratio change, it's because of the point of view of a certain character, or because there is either a home movie being made, found footage doing stuff. But here, there really is no reason to change the aspect ratio the way it does. And it's a shame, because the landscape and the setting of this movie is really great. It is showcased because, as I mentioned, there is good framing and composition in this movie, but I wish they would have, especially the beginning of the movie, where it does start off in this really tiny aspect, which I didn't expect it to. I wish they would have definitely gone wide and shown you all this grand location and this landscape to show you how isolated that house was that he first goes to. You guys will see that in the beginning of the movie. Take that for what you will. But I think when choices like that are made behind the camera, they should have some kind of payoff or some kind of reason. Just to do it for, just doing its sake is really not my cup of tea. But aside from that, the movie does look good throughout. And as I mentioned, the framing and the composition was taken well into account, and the rest of the movie looks good aside from the aspect ratio issues that I have. And for all the hard work done to make this movie look good, the shots and the composition, the framing, the use of the score as well is very helpful throughout to make this movie kind of go. Longlegs gets a 1 for production. I think Perkins did a good job making sure the movie visually looked good, but I do have issues with those choices he made behind the camera and really not having a reason for those decisions. The story and the script was also written by Osgood Perkins. There is an interesting concept buried deep at the core of this narrative, but unfortunately the idea is better in theory.
Aren't you telling me?
He'll kill and kill again.
I know you're not afraid of a little bit of dark.
Aside from the underwhelming story, the movie heavily drags throughout all 3 acts. At least the story manages to successfully build some tension and suspense. But again, this is a problem that I have with this movie. There is no real payoff to any of the suspense and tension we do get. As the story goes, you will be seeing hints of just the little spooks here and there, but it's really empty. It's not scary. I don't know why this is being touted as being one of the scariest things in decades. It really isn't. It's not. There is some creep factor to it because of Nicolas Cage's performance, and we'll get to that in the next segment, but there really isn't much to be scared of here. And then, to top it all off, we do get some really interesting stuff happening in the last 10 to 15 minutes of this movie, where it does pick up in action, it picks up in pace, it picks up in actual story. And it goes somewhere. It tries to do something. But the rest of this movie, there's just not a lot going on. And for the interesting concept that's buried deep within this thing, I do give Longlegs some credit and give it a 1 for story. I did like the aspect of the occult stuff, but I just wish it happened a lot sooner. I wish they kind of ramped up the action a lot sooner. We don't really get a lot of action, and that's why this movie drags a lot. It's just a lot of nothing. Because even the detective work in this movie isn't really exciting. There's just not a lot here going on, and when it does happen, it's too little, too late. The entire cast fails to impress. This is due mainly in part to the poorly written and poorly directed cast of characters. The entire ensemble have poor dynamics and development and are ultimately a detriment to the overall movie.
Do you still say your prayers?
No, Mom. I never said my prayers, never once.
Michael Monroe, who I usually love, delivers an awkward performance and leaves a lot to be desired. Nick Cage, on the other hand, does his best Nick Cage on the very negative spectrum of Nick Cagey stuff. And Alicia Witt, she struggles to be believable. I really had a tough time with all these characters and the actors and actresses and their performances. As I mentioned before, I am a big fan of Michael Monroe. You guys know that. I've mentioned her name before on this show and on The Morgue as well. I love her stuff from before, but lately she's been doing some work that's not too great. I wish this character would have been a little bit more developed. If the character was developed better, I think the performance that Micah gives us would be received a little better through my eye. But because of how everything is explained and how everything goes down and how it's all developed, it's not the best. As I mentioned, Nick Cage is also just very out there in this performance. It's a hit or miss for some people. It's gonna be like that. It's gonna be very polarizing. I was not a fan of it at all. I've seen great Nick Cage. This is far, far from it. This is probably one of my biggest disappointments of this movie because I walked in knowing we had a strong cast behind these characters, and I was disappointed at every turn. And for the poor characters and the poor acting, Longlegs gets a 0 for ensemble. This, as I mentioned, is one of my biggest letdowns and disappointment of this movie. I expected something very different than what I got. And what I got was not my cup of tea. There was not much blood or gore in this movie, but there are a handful of impactful kills that managed to liven up the mood. As I mentioned previously, the tension and suspense were key to building any real horror in this movie, but that aspect falls flat at the end. One thing I really did like about this movie was the use of its practical effects. I'm not gonna go into too much detail about it, but there is a scene in the latter portion of the movie that I thought was just really well done, and it looks really good on the screen. I wish we got more of that throughout the movie. I thought, based on all the blurbs and the early reviews, I thought that's what we were gonna be getting throughout the movie, but we don't get much here, so just be patient with it if you are gonna watch this thing. All the blood and all that fun stuff is later on in the movie. There is one early kill that comes out of nowhere that was actually really well done, but again, there's not much here to grasp onto, as is the case with the story. It just kind of trails throughout. There's not much going on in terms of the story, in terms of the characters, in terms of the horror. And what we get, again, as I said in the story, is too little, too late. And for the good use of practical effects in the later part of the movie and the way it's shot and the way it just looks, Longlegs gets a 1 for horror. I wish they would have done more of that, because when it was done extremely well, and it looked really good, folks. I can't say that enough. It looked really good. But that is why I also have issues. It's like, why are you not doing more of this? You can obviously do this very well. Let's showcase this. And on top of that, this was a serial killer, whereas, like, yes, there is a body count, but it's a body count that's told to you. you don't really see any of this stuff going on. It's a lot of blah, 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 and not enough action. What a disappointment. This movie was not good. It was boring, and the horror tactics were lackluster and uninspired. Stay away from this one. Again, I'm gonna go on record as saying I don't know what a lot of people saw. I see a lot of praise for this movie, a lot of 5 stars, a lot of 4s, 4.5 stars, a lot of 9s and 10s. I don't get it, folks. This movie wasn't good. I didn't like any aspect, really, of this movie. And it was just such a bore, man. It was just such a bore that when things did happen, cool, great, but like, where was this an hour ago? You know what I mean? In terms of its legacy, I will not be rewatching this. I don't think it has any rewatchability. Just stay away from this one, folks. So to tally it up, Longlegs gets a 1 for production, a 1 for story, a 0 for ensemble, a 1 for horror, and a 0 for legacy, bringing its total score up to a 3. I was not a fan of this movie, and I was not a fan of all the hype it was getting prior to, because it just didn't add up. All the reviews, all the critics were saying this was the scariest thing in decades, this was the best thing ever. It wasn't. It wasn't, folks. It really wasn't. And I'm telling you right now, stay away from this one, because you're gonna waste about 2 hours of your time. If you really wanna watch a superior movie, go watch Watcher on Shudder. That is one of Micah Monroe's finest performances, and the entire movie oozes with suspense and with tension. It is so good. It's way better than Longlegs. It is a 10 out of 10 for me. Longlegs obviously is on a complete opposite spectrum. Go watch Watcher instead on Shudder. I think you'll have a way much better time with that movie, folks. Stay away from Longlegs.
Can you tell me what time it is?
And that's a wrap, folks. Thank you for watching Scary World. Don't forget to drop a comment down below and hit the thumbs up on the video. Most importantly, do not forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. We are dropping spoiler-free horror reviews all week long. Plus, we have the CorpseFeed official podcast show, The Morgue, dropping every Tuesday on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast streams. Go like, subscribe, and share. Drop us some stars wherever you get your podcast and a review. We would highly appreciate it, folks. Don't forget to check out our socials. We are everywhere. But most importantly, come back to YouTube, subscribe, hit that bell. That way you know when we drop a new video. We will see you next time for another episode. And remember, it's a scary world out there, but we are here to walk you through it.